Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Ram 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All goes Sri Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Rukmini Mati, when are you ready? You can start, Mati.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devin Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Astapraya Bareshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttam Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. So today we're continuing from verses 23. We're on Canto 4, Chapter 4, 23. King Vina replied, "You are not at all experienced. It is very much regrettable that you are maintaining something which is not religious and accepting it as religious. Indeed, I think you are giving up your real husband who maintains you and are searching after some paramour to worship." 24. Those who out of gross ignorance do not worship the king, who is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, experience happiness neither in this world nor in the world after death. 25. You are so much devoted to the demigods. But who are they? Indeed, your affection for these demigods is exactly like the affection of an unchaste woman who neglects her married life and gives all attention to her paramour. 26, 27. Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Indra, Vayu, the master of air, Yama, the superintendent of death, the sun god, the director of rainfall, Kuvera, the treasurer, the moon god, the predominating deity of the earth, Agni, the fire god, Varuna, the Lord of waters, and all others who are great and competent to bestow benedictions or to curse, all abide in the body of the king. For this reason, the king is known as the reservoir of all demigods, who are simply parts and parcels of the king's body. 28. King Vena continued, "For this reason, O Brahmanas, you should abandon your envy of me, and by your ritualistic activities, you should worship me and offer me all paraphernalia. If you are intelligent, you should know that there is no personality superior to me who can accept the first oblations of all sacrifices." 29. The great sage Maitreya continued, "Thus the king, who became unintelligent due to his sinful life and deviation from the right path, became actually bereft of all good fortune. He could not accept the requests of the great sages, which the sages put before him with great respect, and therefore he was condemned." 30. My dear Vidura, all good fortune unto you, the foolish king, who thought himself very learned, thus insulted the great sages, and the sages, being broken-hearted by the king's word, became very angry at him. 31. All the great saintly sages immediately cried, "Kill him, kill him! He is the most dreadful, sinful person. If he lives, he will certainly turn the whole world into ashes in no time." 32. The saintly sages continue, "This impious, impudent man does not deserve to sit on the throne at all. He is so shameless that he even dare insult the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu." 33. But for King Vena, who is simply inauspicious, who would blaspheme the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose mercy one is awarded all kinds of fortune and opulence. 34. The great sages, thus manifesting their covert anger, immediately decided to kill the king. King Vena was already as good as dead due to his blasphemy against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, without using any weapons, the sage killed King Vena simply by high-sounding words. I'll stop here, bro.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rukmini Premati, for reading translations today. So I'll start with brief prayers and we'll go. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. It's a nice section of this pastime of King Vena. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go through the overall context of this canto and then come to this particular chapter and then this particular verses today. I will not spend too much time, but we'll start there. So we have some context in case somebody has joined this journey a little later. So overall, in the last, from third canto onwards, we are hearing the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya Muni. And in their conversation, Vidura asked him the question to understand about this secondary creation. So that is about the dynasty of Swayambhu Manu, he asked. And then Maitreya Muni started to describe Swayambhu Manu dynasty from the third canto. We heard Swayambhu Manu has two sons, Uttanapada and Priyavrata. Their dynasty is not described yet, except little bit about Dhruva's dynasty. Dhruva, actually, Uttanapada dynasty is what we are covering now. So, and then three daughters he has, Devhuti, Akuti, and Prasuti. In Canto 3, primarily Devhuti marriage to her husband Kardamuni, and then having a son Kapildev, and Kapildev instructed her in philosophy. That was discussed. And then fourth canto, that Swayambhu Manu dynasty is being discussed furthermore. And in the first chapter, we started with hearing about his other daughters, Devhuti's other children, and Akuti and Prasuti's dynasty. And while discussing about Prasuti dynasty, we heard about Daksha pastime, because Prasuti married to Daksha, and then how Daksha, Lord Shiva, and Sati interaction happened. That pastimes we heard in the first, second to seventh chapter. And then he moved on to, after describing the dynasty of the three daughters, Maitreya Muni moved on to Uttanapada's dynasty. Uttanapada's dynasty, we heard about Dhruma's pastime in the last several chapters. And then in the same dynasty of Uttanapada, in the glorious dynasty of Dhrumaraj, we'll hear about Pruthumaraj, who's another wonderful devotee and a great king. But before it, in between the transition from Dhrumaraj pastime to Pruthumaraj pastime, we're hearing some more descendants of Dhruv Maharaj, and we heard about Anga Maharaj in the last chapter. And then we heard how Anga Maharaj happened to have a very cruel son Vena, because he gave the payasam to his wife Sunita, who's a daughter of death personified. So in this case, now in this chapter we started hearing about King Vena. So where we heard so far is the sages, when there is no king, because the Anga went to the forest, we heard in the last chapter, by leaving home, by leaving kingdom, sages enthroned Vena as the king, even though ministers were not favorable for that idea. And then we heard how Vena, because he's so cruel in character, but is very, very capable in terms of skill and in terms of ability. So it's a wrong combination when somebody has a power. So he did so much atrocities because of his bad character of being cruel and filled with pride. So not only he troubled the citizens, and he also prohibited all religious activities being done by Brahmanas also. That means he stopped the spiritual elevation of the society by not letting people practice Varnashram Dharma. So when the sages understood this, that all the citizens, this guy, instead of this king, this cruel king, instead of offering material protection and spiritual protection, is actually degrading them by not letting them perform their duties. So we heard in the last session from Sri Krishna Prabhuji that how sages made a plan to pacify King Vena, and they explained in different ways to King Vena. So I summarized it briefly here. First of all, they told him, you should follow Dharma so that you can become free from all miseries and you can also achieve liberation like that. And then they told, maybe he doesn't care about liberation, let us say. Maybe he cares about his position. So they told him, don't spoil everybody's spiritual life, because that way your royal position will go away, your opulences will go away. So at least they tell him, in this life also you'll get affected. Even if next life is not good, who knows? But in this life also you'll not become king. You'll not be king for a long time like that. Then they told about the positive enforcement. First they told him problems of his actions currently. Now they told what will be a good thing for him to do. They told him what a pious king could do. If a pious king protects his citizens and then accept taxes in that way, then he get enjoyment in this world also and in the next world also. That means the next life also. That's how they try to persuade him to encourage him to become a pious king like that. And they also told him a pious king actually satisfies the Lord. How? By ensuring that citizens are practicing Varnashram Dharma and citizens are worshipping the Supreme Lord. So they are appealing to him gently, nicely, to turn himself from impious to pious king, for his own benefit and for his benefit of the society like that. And when they told about how pious king ensures everybody satisfied the Supreme Lord, then they talked about how Supreme Lord is satisfied, you can get everything and everything, whatever you want. Because he is Supreme Lord after all, so he can give whatever you need. So then he told how the sages told him to direct the citizens to worship the demigods through sacrifices, understanding that demigods are the limbs of the Supreme Lord. So then they said, when demigods are satisfied, they'll give you whatever you need, because that is even from Bhagavatam we know the cycle of sacrifice. How when we satisfy Supreme Lord and his representatives as demigods with sacrifice, they'll give whatever is needed for the prosperous running of the society. And they also said, but if you stop these sacrifices, you're actually disrespecting demigods. So then you'll not get what you want. That's what we heard in the last section. Now, go into today's section onwards. So basically in the last section, we saw how King Vena was cruel and stopping sacrifices and stopping spiritual progress of society. And then we heard how sages explaining how we need to encourage and ensure other citizens are worshipping the Supreme Lord through sacrifices and through proper performance of Varnashram duties. Now, for a person like King Vena, who we can see as a person affected by mode of ignorance currently. So such a person, how does he behave? How does he think? How does he take things? How does he accept knowledge? We can see with the Vena's example. So before we go into the details, I want to mention something so we can pay attention to it. Basically, when we read in scriptures, we are getting positive examples to learn how to follow the positive example and grow in our devotion service. That is one thing we are seeing. And we also see negative examples of what is unfavorable for our devotional service, unfavorable for our ultimate goal in serving Krishna. So when we hear negative examples from Shastra, we need to pay attention of what not to do. So that is the other thing to capture. So that's what we are getting from King Vena's example today. So going back to the today's section, in today's section, King Vena, after hearing from the sages, wonderful instructions they gave, for them it's wonderful, but for him it's not wonderful. He is thinking. So he gives an arrogant reply to sages. That means whatever they said, he did not accept them in the heart. He did not understand them fully. It didn't go inside. So that means he did not really, for his material intelligence in mode of ignorance, he could not accept that knowledge. He could not understand that knowledge. This is a thing we can understand. Remember in Bhagavad Gita, person in mode of ignorance thinks right thing as wrong and wrong thing as right. They have a complete opposite understanding of the knowledge in the mode of goodness, or what is the real right thing. So that's what happened with King Vena also. Not only that, we'll see this his response, that mode of ignorance people, when we give them knowledge, highest knowledge and right knowledge, that doesn't usually uncover their ignorance, but instead, whatever misconceptions, whatever biases, whatever prejudices they already have in them, they will make those strong with the knowledge that is being provided. Instead of using that knowledge to remove the prejudices, removing the biases, removing the misconceptions, they will actually make them strong. That's the unfortunate situation of being in mode of ignorance. Not only King Vena was in mode of ignorance, but he was characterized by pride, false pride. So that is why we can see once when we are hearing King Vena's response to sages, let us keep that in mind. He was affected by mode of ignorance. He was affected by bad character like pride and being cruel. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Then we can process them to understand how not to be and how we can protect ourselves also. So now, first of all, he says, actually, you sages, you're speaking all these things. You're very inexperienced, like small children. Small children may not know so much. Like that, you don't know what is wrong. You are thinking adharma is dharma and dharma is adharma. So you were thinking, basically he says, then he gives an analogy or a simile that talks about how, let us say, wife is maintained nicely, protected nicely by husband. But even though husband is maintaining her nicely and protecting her nicely, instead of giving her service to husband, keeping chase to husband, she actually is searching for another paramour outside the marriage life. So he gives that simile to explain that sages, even though king, Vena is maintaining them, he's saying that I'm maintaining you like a husband maintains wife, but you were not chaste to me, you were not serving me. Instead, you want to serve the Supreme Lord, who is like a paramour for a wife. Like that he's giving. See his impudence, how he's thinking himself. He's thinking he is the real person to be served, and he's thinking serving him as king is dharma, serving Supreme Lord is adharma, he's thinking. So, in fact, this is a blasphemous nature he's engaging in. He says, king is the Supreme Lord actually, not represented as Supreme Lord. He says, king is the Supreme Lord. And you are all ignorant. That's why if you don't worship the king, me as a king, you will not be happy in this world or the next world also. He's turning around their own statements that to be happy in this world and the next world, somebody needs to perform dharma and worship Supreme Lord. But he's telling the opposite. He's saying, I am the Supreme Lord. If you don't worship me, then you will not be happy now also and in the future also. So this is the blasphemous nature where somebody is thinking, I am the Supreme Lord. So generally, we know from scriptures that king is a representative of Supreme Lord. That's correct. So we should respect them as a representative of Supreme Lord to a king. But king should not think that I am the Supreme Lord. He should think I am the caretaker on behalf of Supreme Lord. I need to extend myself. I need to help them to serve the Supreme Lord like that. Similarly, we as parents, we as teachers, we as somebody who's in a position as guru, they should not then think themselves as Supreme Lord. That's a mistake. They should only think themselves as representative. Similarly, we as any responsible leaders, including parents, including elder brothers like that, whenever we are in responsible position, we should not think we are ourselves deserving all the respect to enjoy, all the honor to enjoy, all the worship to enjoy, like that. We should think how we can serve my dependents so that they can serve the Supreme Lord. Not that how they can serve me, how they can give me enjoyment like that. We might, sometimes it may be necessary, we might encourage others to serve us as a representative of Supreme Lord and as a representative of Guru. But we should not become into false conception that I am the Guru, I am the Supreme Lord like that. So we should see ourselves as an instrument to accept the service, to pass it on to our superiors. We should not think that we are entitled to that service or enjoyment, that honor, whatever is being received like that. We should pass it on to our superiors like that. So that's a mistake here. King Vena is doing. He's thinking he is the Supreme Lord and he is the as a king, and everybody should worship him. Everybody should contribute to his enjoyment like that. And he says, your affection for demigods is like affection of an unchaste woman. The simile we already discussed. That means instead of being affectionate to me, as a king, you're affectionate to demigods. That's not proper. Not only that, he's saying, actually, demigods are all in the body of a king. So unfortunate. He's not understanding that all of us are part and parcel of Krishna or Supreme Lord. Similarly, demigods are part and parcel of Supreme Lord. He's saying demigods are part and parcel of me because he's thinking himself as Krishna or Supreme Lord. See the false pride he has. So now he says, because demigods are part and parcel of me, actually you should leave your envious feelings towards me and you should actually offer all oblations to me. I'm the first person to be worshipped. Like Supreme Lord is the first person to be worshipped. All worship should go to me, like that is talking. This is showing all the pride that he has and the misconceptions he has. And you see the depth of the mode of ignorance, that he could not understand the knowledge even though the correct knowledge was given by sages. So what can we learn from these kind of scenarios is that we should watch out for mode of ignorance tendencies in each one of us, in our own life, in our own situation. What mode of ignorance qualities I have? Do I listen to my superiors all the time or not really? Do I obey my superiors or do I disobey them? When somebody tells me nice words, do I dismiss them thinking that I know better? Or do I evaluate? Maybe what they're telling is good for me. Maybe what they're telling is in accordance with the Shastras, Guru and Sadhu. Maybe let me consider. Do I think like that? Or do I dismiss everything and I'm the right person always? That is the tendencies we need to watch out for. And then we need to always consider that worshipping of the Supreme Lord is the highest. And we should always understand that we are just an instrument in the service to Krishna. Even if we are given some position in life, even if we are enjoying some particular superiority in life currently, or some extra opulence we have in life currently. So we should understand everything is given by Supreme Lord for serving him, for serving others so that they can elevate spiritually. That is one of the important lessons we can learn. Another lesson is a leader must be actually selfless, and more than selfless, he must have spiritual understanding for himself and understand that spiritual welfare of others is to be protected, is to be encouraged. like that he needs to know. So if a leader is not spiritual, if the leader is not selfless, they cannot do their responsibility nicely. So with that understanding, we also need to strive to be selfless in serving the Supreme Lord, selfless in serving others, for them to grow in their spiritual consciousness like that. So that is the important characteristics as anybody who is trying to help others, including our children. Yeah, that's the other thing we can learn from this section, from bad example of King Vena. So now sages kill Vena finally, not with weapon, with just mantras, with their words. So here we are hearing in the next section how Vena could not accept respectful requests of sages due to his nature of his intelligence is contaminated currently. How? Because of his sinful activities. So if our actions are sinful, our intelligence can get contaminated. If our actions are pure, then our intelligence can also stay pure. How else we can make sure our intelligence is pure? When we are listening from Guru Sadhu Shastra, then our intelligence can be strengthened and it can be purified. Other way to purify our intelligence is by doing our sadhana regularly, by chanting our rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So like that, when we chant and do our devotion service, we can go above the sinful attitudes, above the mode of ignorance, above the mode of passion, above even mode of goodness finally. So by engaging in devotion service nicely, in the guidance of a superior Vaishnava, in the guidance in obeying a guru, then we can go beyond the mode of nature that we may be currently in. Even if we are affected by mode of ignorance currently, we can transcend that by taking proper guidance and by being submissive to their instructions of the guidance we are receiving and by following devotion service nicely. So some of the characteristics are described here, that how he deviated from the right path, and because he disobeyed the authorities, he lost all the blessings from the authorities and he lost all good fortune. Similarly, when we disobey our authorities, our parents, our spiritual masters, our mentor, then we will also lose good fortune because our blessings are lost. And he actually thought himself very learned on the contrary. That's why this is the sign of pride. Because we hear from Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter also, Krishna says, humility is the first item of receiving knowledge, process of knowledge. So if I'm proud, I don't want to listen to anybody else to know anything. Only if I'm humble, I can listen to somebody first, then I can accept it also, if I understand it. But if I'm proud, I don't even listen first of all. Even if I listen, I think I know better. So we'll not accept the knowledge. So we have to be watch out for pride and cultivate humility to grow in spiritual life. And then after seeing this nature of King Vena, you notice sages did not directly go to killing first. They tried peaceful means of convincing him, influencing him with respectful requests to become a pious king. But he didn't listen. So how saintly persons do not tolerate, even though they are very, very kind towards everyone, including other living entities, they do not tolerate envious serpents like snakes and scorpion. Similarly, they thought is going to cause damage to the society. He will quickly turn the whole world to ashes. How is that? He's not killing everybody, but the point is the spiritual consciousness is not letting the soul elevate themselves to higher spiritual level to go towards Krishna, is not helping towards that. That's why scriptures talk about such a state is like Atmaha, killer of the soul, like that. So he's actually is not helping in everybody's welfare like that. And also they became angry not because he's not listening to them, Because he considers himself as Supreme Lord and is blaspheming the Supreme Lord himself. So they know that when somebody blasphemes Supreme Lord, they will be ruined. So he's not able to appreciate Lord's mercy. So with that understanding, they became very angry and they decided to kill him with angry words. So now, one of the other lessons we can learn is, two of the lessons we can learn is, one of them is, we can tolerate somebody's insult towards us, but we should not tolerate somebody's insult towards Supreme Lord and his devotees, especially devotees who are propagating the holy name. So that's the important lesson we can learn. So we cannot tolerate blasphemy towards Supreme Lord and his devotees. Another important lesson is, we need to learn to appreciate Supreme Lord's mercy in our life. He was not able to appreciate Supreme Lord's mercy in his life. How is the Supreme Lord's mercy manifesting in our life? Supreme Lord's mercy manifests in our life in terms of the resources, material resources that we have also. Number one, the job we have, the money we have, the possessions we have. And then in terms of the family we get also. It's the Supreme Lord's mercy only. And not only that, our being able to engage in devotion service currently is a mercy of the Supreme Lord. Like that, from the time to time, we need to contemplate, reflect in our own life how I am receiving Supreme Lord's mercy in my life. When we do that, then we can protect ourselves from going into situation of pride, because it will be very evident for us. We'll become grateful for the mercy of the Supreme Lord, mercy of the devotees in our lives. Then naturally we don't think that I know everything because of myself. I have everything because of myself. I'm able to do everything nicely because of myself. We'll leave that misconception. Instead, we understand everything I'm able to do, everything I'm able to know, everything I'm able to have in my life is just because of the mercy of Supreme Lord and mercy of his devotees only. When we realize that, then we stay in the mood of an instrument in his hands, in the Supreme Lord's hands. Then with that mood, we can carry ourselves in a humble way. And then that will help us to go beyond the mode of ignorance into passion and goodness and beyond also. So that's the lesson we're learning from seeing the native example of King Vena and how sages, and from the sages' words also. Yeah, we'll pause here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kupa sindhubhya evacha. Paditana pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.